Hello everyone, I am Harika Shinde. I am from Institute of Aeronautical Engineering and I am from Computer Science and Engineering branch. Today I am here to share and present my AAT Tech Talk video of a course Business Economics and Financial Analysis. My topic is the law of diminishing marginal utility. Let's start. The main contents of these PPT are here we are going to learn about what is utility, the marginal utility analysis, the law of diminishing marginal utility, limitations of law of diminishing marginal utility, and exceptions. Let's begin. So, main, what is utility? The concept of utility is used in neoclassical economics to explain the operation of law of demand. Following Jeremy Bentham, John Stuart Mill, and other 19th century British economics philosophers, economists apply the term utility to that property in any object whereby it tends to produce benefit, advantage, pleasure, good, or happiness. Utility is thus the want satisfying power of commodity. The utility of a consumer is a measure of the satisfaction that the consumer expects to obtain from a consumption of goods and services. When he spends money on a stock of a commodity which has the capacities to satisfy his wants. Utility is thus the anticipated satisfaction by the consumer, and satisfaction is a tangible satisfaction derived. A commodity has utility for a consumer even when it is not consumed. Utility is a subjective and relative entity and varies from one person to person. A commodity has different levels of a utility for the same person at different places or at different points of a time. It should be noted that utility is not same thing as usefulness. From the economic standpoint, even harmful things like liquor may be said to have utility because people want them. Utility hypothesis forms the basis of the theory of a consumer behavior. From time to time, different theories have been advanced to explain the consumer behavior and thus to explain the consumer's demand for the product. Two important theories are marginal utility analysis proposed by Alfred Marshall, indifference curve analysis proposed by J.R. Hicks and R.J.D. Allen. So, what is marginal utility analysis? Let's start and see about what is marginal utility analysis. The marginal utility theory formulated by Alfred Marshall, a British economist, seeks to explain how a consumer chooses to spend his income on different goods and services so as to maximize his utility. Marginal utility theory treats consumer as striving to maximize utility, which is a quantitative measure of a consumer's well-being or a satisfaction. According to Marshall, utility is a numerical score in terms of utils, representing the satisfaction that a consumer obtains from the consumption of a particular good. Utility refers to the hypothetical measuring unit of a utility. This theory is based on certain assumptions. But before stating the assumption, let us understand the meaning of the term total utility and marginal utility. So, the total utility, assuming that utility is quantitatively measurable and additive, total utility may be defined as the sum of utility derived from different units of a commodity consumed by a consumer. Total utility is a sum of marginal utilities derived from a consumptions of different units. That is, total utility TU is equals to MU1 plus MU2 plus so on up to MUN, where MU1, MU2 up to MUN, etc. are marginal utilities of a successive units of a commodity. So, what is marginal utility? Marginal utility is defined as the utility of a good or a service is a change in total utility generated by consuming one additional unit of that good or a service. In other words, it is the utility derived from the marginal or one additional unit consumed or possessed by the individual. Marginal utility equals to the addition made to the total utility by the addition of consumption of one more unit of a commodity, symbolically where MUN equals to TUN minus TUN minus 1. MUN is a marginal utility of the mth unit, where TUN is a total utility of a mth unit, and TUN minus 1 is a total utility of the n minus 1 the unit. So, the main thing, The law of diminishing marginal utility. One of the important laws under marginal utility analysis is the law of diminishing marginal utility. The law of diminishing marginal utility, which states that each successive unit of a good or a service consumed adds less to the total unit than the previous unit, is based on an important fact that while total wants of a person are virtually unlimited, each single want is satiable. That is, each want is capable of being satisfied. Since each want is satiable, as a consumer consumes more and more units of a good, the intensity of his want for the goes on decreasing, and a point is reached where the consumer no longer wants it. Thus, the greater the amount of a good a consumer has, the less an additional unit is worth to him or her. Marshall, who was the exponent of a marginal utility analysis, stated the laws as follows. Hence, his laws are: the additional benefit which a person derives from a given increase in the stock of a thing diminishes with every increase in the stock that he already has. In other words, as a consumer increases the consumption of any commodity, keeping the constant the consumption of other commodities, the marginal utility of the variable commodity must eventually decline. This law describes a very fundamental tendency of human nature. In simple words, it says that as a consumer consumes more units of a good, the extra satisfaction that he derives from an extra unit of a good goes on falling. So, we may illustrate the law with the help of an example. Consider the table 1, in which we have presented the total utility and marginal utility derived by a person from a chocolate bars consumed per day, keeping constant all other facts that affect the utility. So here is the table which shows the quantity of a chocolate bar consumed per day and total utility and marginal utility. Total and marginal utility schedule. So, when one chocolate bar is consumed, the total utility derived by the person is 20 utilis, and the marginal utility is also 20 utils. With the consumption of a second chocolate bar, the total utility rises to 34 and corresponding marginal utility is 14. With the second chocolate bar, the consumer enjoys greater total utility, but the extra utility derived from the second is smaller than that he arrived from the first. We see that till the consumption of a chocolate bars increases to 4, the marginal utility from the additional chocolate bars goes on diminishing. That is, the total utility goes on increasing at a diminishing rate. The fifth chocolate bar adds no utility, and therefore the total utility remains the same at 50. From table 1, we find that for every 1 unit increment in a chocolate consumption, the marginal utility is equals to the change in total utility. The total utility increases every time the consumer consumes more units of a chocolate bar till he reaches the point of a satiation. But the additional utility he derives from each successive chocolate bar gets smaller and smaller as he consumes more. Putting it differently, the rate at which total utility increases gets smaller and smaller as consumption increases. From table 1, we also find that there are some well-defined relationship between total utility and marginal utility. Total utility raises as long as mu is positive, but at a diminishing rate because mu is diminishing. Marginal utility diminishes throughout. When marginal utility is 0, the total utility is maximum. It is a saturation point. When marginal utility is negative, total utility is diminishing. Mu is the rate of change of a total utility, or it is the slope of a TU curve, that is total utility curve. Mu, that is marginal utility, can be positive, 0 or a negative. So here it is the graph on which, drawn on the basis of a table 1, can be graphically presented to show the relationship between the marginal utility and the total utility. First, on taking y-axis on a total utility and x-axis units. Next, a marginal utility graph taking y-axis as a marginal utility and units as a x-axis. limitations and exceptions of a law of diminishing marginal utility. The law may not apply in the case of prestigious goods and articles like gold, cash, diamonds, etc., where a greater quantity may increase the utility rather than diminishing it. The law also may not hold well in the case of hobbies, rate collections, etc., where with every addition to the collection, the marginal utility will go on rising. Similarly, people who seek greater knowledge and information will be more satisfied with every additional information secured by them. The law may not be operating in cases such as creative art, painting, music, poetry, etc., as more of these would be generate greater satisfaction. So, the law does not hold good in the case of habit forming commodities like alcohol, cigarettes, and computer games, etc., because those who are habituated into these may experience increasing utility with every additional intake. The law also fails in the case of people with a miserly behavior, as accumulation of every additional unit of a money would give them greater levels of satisfaction. However, we should keep in mind that in all above mentioned cases, the fundamental assumptions necessary for the law to operate are not met, and as such, they are not exceptions in the real sense. So, here was my PPT regarding the law of diminishing marginal utility and a total utility and marginal utility proposed by Alfred Marshall. Thank you.